Have you ever felt a profound exhaustion, not of the body, but of the very spirit? When a woman reaches this point, when she ceases the relentless pursuit of external affection, when she stops contorting her soul to be selected, when she abandons the silent, daily labors of justifying her existence, something primal stirs within, the life force that once flowed desperately outward, craving witness, longing for an embrace, yearning to be desired, reverses its course. It turns back toward its source. And in this homecoming, her entire world transforms. This is the soul's journey toward integration. For too long, she may have been captive to a hidden complex, the conviction that love is a reward to be won, that her value is a verdict delivered by another's gaze. She confused notice with nurture and mistook attachment for affirmation. Her inner masculine, that archetypal force of logic, direction, and resolve, was often cast outward onto figures who appeared certain or commanding. They became temporary vessels for the power she had not yet claimed as her own. But these vessels always faltered. The fantasy inevitably faded, for projection is a ghost that cannot long inhabit a solid form. It must eventually return to its sender. When she stops chasing, she starts building. This is not the end of love. Love is her core, her atmosphere, her fundamental state. What dies is the delusion that she is a half, seeking its missing piece in the outer world. The very drive that once pursued now becomes the force that creates. It morphs into vision, into understanding, into choice. She starts to perceive how systems, even the most tender fairy tales of romance, once thrived on her hunger. Jung teaches us that the life we do not live does not vanish. It retreats into the shadow, waiting. And when she ceases her flight, she encounters that shadow directly. It is not gentle. It is not reassuring. It is a storm of fury, of sorrow, of neglected strength. She meets the self she muted, the part that was furious when overlooked, the part that dreaded its own invisibility without an admirer's focus. She understands that what she labeled as love was frequently manipulation in the costume of concern, or anxiety masquerading as dedication. And as this awareness dawns, the miraculous occurs. The shadow ceases to be a monster. It becomes her mentor. It turns into an internal guide, steering her toward her genuine truth. She recalls the Stoic wisdom. That tranquility is not determined by our circumstances, but by our response to them. An obstacle, as Marcus Aurelius noted, becomes the path itself. And so, the pain that felt like an ending becomes a beginning. The scar is no longer a flaw. It becomes instruction. The very longing that once propelled her outward now drives her to establish limits, to cherish aloneness, to construct an interior fortress that will not crumble when someone departs. There is an undeniable magnetism in a woman who has ceased seeking approval. She does not spurn love. She simply refuses to worship it. Her worth is a settled matter, and paradoxically, this makes her profoundly compelling. But now that desire no longer holds the reins. She can stand in the warmth of admiration without dissolving. She can face dismissal and remain intact, because she has connected with the part of her soul that is beyond taking. In Jung's framework, she begins the work of integrating her inner masculine. No longer projected, but now personally embodied. Her decisions become intentional, her mind incisive, her path unwavering. The feminine within her does not diminish. It matures, becoming more receptive, more sagacious, more grounded. She learns that real love is not a hunt, but a state of being, not a performance, but a shared experience. The interplay between her inner masculine and feminine finds a harmonious, sacred, creative balance. The restless yearning becomes a deep calm. The fear becomes liberation. This woman begins to exist not for a love story, but for a life of significance. She no longer inquires, will I be chosen? Instead, she demands, what do I choose to build with my existence? Her attention turns inward, and there she finds the sovereignty she had been seeking in all the wrong kingdoms. This metamorphosis is not without cost. The old habits fight back. The ego, once nourished by the turbulence of yearning and the mirage of control, shudders as it disintegrates. It will hiss, you are becoming heartless. You will end up isolated. You are losing your warmth. But under that fear, something timeless is serene. For she has not grown cold. She has become lucid. And clarity is not the death of emotion. It is its master. The woman who abandons the chase begins to incarnate a quiet authority that is difficult to label. People feel it when she arrives. Not loud, not seeking attention, but undeniably there. She carries herself with an air belonging to herself, entirely. She no longer engages in rivalry, measurement, or pleas for comprehension. She knows now that peace is not discovered in being cherished by others, but in cherishing herself sufficiently to stop requiring their need. Her peace is her ultimate power. There is a subtle, profound shift when a woman escapes the orbit of romantic validation. It is not a loud event. It is a quiet dawning. At first, she might not even notice. She just feels deeply fatigued. Not a physical tiredness, but a weariness of the soul. The endless loops of effort, of waiting, of hoping, start to feel empty. The routines that once gave her a sense of self now feel like confinement. And so almost without thought, she ceases. She stops pursuing. She stops bartering her value. She allows quiet to replace calculation. And in that silence, she truly encounters herself for the first time. Jung would name this the encounter with the self, the archetype of completeness, the profound core of the psyche that was always there, waiting to be revealed. When a woman halts the pursuit of love, she stops feeding the idols of external affirmation. Instead, she turns toward the inner sanctuary. It is there she grasps a fundamental truth. She has been projecting her own sacred attributes onto others. Every person she ever deeply adored, every heart she ever followed, was in some way a reflection of her own unlived potential. She saw her own fortitude in their assurance, her own insight in their enigma, her own gentleness in their temporary care. They were not her missing half. They were her mirror. Jung stated that until we bring the unconscious to light, it will steer our lives, and we will name it destiny. So when she stops chasing, her destiny itself begins to shift. The unconscious narratives, the ones that whispered she was unfinished, unwanted, or unworthy, begin to lose their grip. She no longer acts them out. She witnesses them. She starts to comprehend the story, beneath the story, the psychological blueprint of her own desire. This is where the voyage turns inward, into the deep wilderness of the spirit. There she discovers not only beauty, but also turmoil. All the aspects of herself she renounced in her quest for love. The rage she was told was excessive. The ambition she concealed to be more agreeable. The gut feeling she dismissed as unsound. All these pieces wait in the shadows, whispering, "You are home." It is no longer about romance. It becomes love as totality. Love as consciousness. She starts to tend to her inner world the way she once tended to others. She honors her stillness, her intuition, her authentic voice. She creates not for an audience, but because the act of creation is sacred. She learns that what she was pursuing in others was not merely affection. It was the lost conversation with her own soul. The Stoics taught that freedom is not the lack of attachment, but the command over it. Courage, as Seneca wrote, is freedom. The bravery here is not in denying love, but in confronting the void that appears when you cease defining yourself through it. That void is holy. It is the fertile ground from which the true self emerges. And yet, this transformation often bewilders those who knew her before. Some will claim she is different. Some will label her aloof or severe. But in reality, she has merely stopped performing the role of the pleasing woman, the one who immolates herself for peace, who shoulders the emotional weight of others, who believed that to be loved, she must be less. She no longer enacts that part. And in that refusal, she disrupts the unconscious scripts around her. People sense that her energy is no longer available for their projections, and it disturbs them. But she does not justify herself anymore. She no longer hurries to clarify misunderstandings or absorb their discomfort. She realizes that silence is not aloofness. It is self-respect. In that quiet, she begins to hear a different voice, one that does not originate from fear or lack. It is calm, constant, primordial. It tells her, you were never meant to be diminished. You were never meant to pursue what was already yours. And what is yours cannot be stolen. This is the inner sovereignty born of self-knowledge. It is the quiet assurance of a woman who understands that love, like the sun, can only shine outward after it has first ignited within. In Jung's symbolic language, she starts to embody the archetype of the realized feminine. Not the maiden who waits, not the seeker who pursues, but the sovereign who generates. She becomes the center of her own universe, not through force, but through equilibrium. Her external life becomes a mirror of her internal order. Relationships change. Careers transform. Her sense of mission intensifies. She becomes less impulsive, more perceptive. She no longer needs drama to feel vibrant. She has discovered vitality in serenity. The unstoppable quality is not an aggressive force. It is profound presence. It is the serene conviction that comes from knowing her essence. There arrives a moment when the world starts to relate to her differently. People perceive something.
a certain quiet potency and unshakable tranquility. It isn't pride. It isn't withdrawal. It is a quality of being that makes chatter fall silent. She doesn't need to explain, for her energy communicates first. She has become what Jung might describe as individuated, a person whose inner and outer realities are finally in conversation. When she enters a space now, she doesn't wonder who might see her. She perceives. She reads the environment with an intuitive accuracy that was once impossible, because she was too busy looking for validation. Now her perception is her strength. Her sensitivity, once her greatest wound, has transmuted into wisdom. She no longer confuses attraction for bond or passion for closeness. The individuals she once found compelling now seem obvious. Not because they are different, but because her sight is. Her unconscious projections have cleared. The filter is dropped. And yet, this lucidity brings a peculiar sorrow. When illusions perish, they leave a profound quiet. She begins to see reality as it is, not as she dreamed it would be. This is the Jungian descent, where the soul journeys through darkness not as penalty, but as purification. The ego grieves the death of fantasy while the deeper self murmurs. This is what liberation feels like. Liberation is not glamorous at first. It is bare. It is still. It is the long pause between the person she was and the person she is becoming. Sometimes it feels like stagnation, but beneath the surface, everything is shifting. Jung termed this process the alchemy of the soul. When the raw material of suffering is transformed into gold through awareness, what once shattered her now refines her. What once labeled her now dissolves into understanding. She begins to distinguish the subtle difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the ache for external confirmation. Solitude is the holy space of the soul. In solitude, she meets her own company and finds it rich. She reads, she wanders, she makes. She learns to listen not only to her thoughts, but to the silence beneath them. She begins to know in her bones that her worth is not a debate. It is a fact. The Stoics, too, spoke of this kind of peace. Epictetus taught that we are free when we cease to rely on what we cannot command. She sees now how much of her life was commanded by a thirst for love, for acknowledgement, for security. But the moment she releases her hold, all she truly requires begins to flow toward her. Not because she commands it, but because her energy no longer pushes it away in fear. There's a beautiful paradox here. When a woman stops chasing love, love begins to arrive in new guises. It appears through creativity, through companionship, through the simple joy of being alive. She starts to experience love not as ownership, but as expression, something she offers freely because it no lessens her. Her heart opens once more, but this time with borders that honor her spirit. She knows now that her refusal is an act of self-love, the kind that guards the sacred ground of her becoming. This evolution also makes her more compassionate, not toward compliance, but toward understanding. She no longer holds resentment for those who wounded her. She sees their injuries for what they were, unconscious shadows acting out their pain. Jung said that when two personalities meet, it is like the mixing of two chemical agents. If there is a change, both are altered. Every heartache, every rejection, every moment of pursuit was a reaction that altered her. None of it was without purpose. In time, she begins to sense her calling again. But now it is not born from a need to prove. It arises naturally, like a river finding its course. She no longer seeks to amaze. She seeks to articulate. The distinction is everything. Her work, her voice, her connections, all begin to resonate with her inner truth. People often misinterpret this piece for detachment, but it is the opposite. It is the fullness of being present without needing to manage the result. She can love deeply now because she no longer dreads loss. She can give because she no longer needs to receive. She has become, as Jung described, whole, not flawless. And so the unstoppable part of her is not an immunity to hurt. She can still be wounded, but suffering no longer dictates her identity. Her strength is not the absence of fragility. It is the choice not to abandon herself in its presence. She has mastered the art of self-return, and that is a form of magic the world cannot extinguish. There is a moment in every woman's awakening when she realizes she no longer desires to be understood by the world. She desires to be true to herself. This is the quiet revolution that follows her retreat from the chase. For so long, her vitality moved outward, striving to be selected, to be visible, to be comprehended. But now the axis has rotated inward. She no longer lives to fit into another's narrative. She authors her own. This inward turn is not self-absorption. It is psychological unification. Jung wrote that individuation is not about perfection, but about completeness. Completeness demands meeting the opposites within: light and dark, gentleness and fierceness, connection and autonomy. When a woman stops chasing love, she stops fracturing herself. She permits contradiction to coexist without apology. She can be both tender and resilient, caring and decisive, loving and free. Her emotional landscape, once ruled by reaction, becomes guided by contemplation. She no longer asks, "Why did he leave?" but "What within me was seeking outside what I had not yet cultivated inside?" This is not self-blame. It is self-recognition.
It is the instant she comprehends that every relationship was a reflection, and every sorrow a guide. Gradually, the dread of being alone transforms into the profound calm of belonging to herself. She learns that solitude is not the absence of others, but the presence of her true self. She begins to see her own patterns of emotional survival, the ways she adapted to evade abandonment, the masks she wore to feel secure. And when she removes those masks, the woman underneath breathes fully for the first time. The Stoics would call this the return to a self-directed life, a life where peace depends solely on one's own inner state. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we have power over our mind, not outside events. Realizing this, he said, we find strength. That realization is what now grounds her. She no longer clings to the shifting tides of others' feelings. She becomes a steady shore. But this growth does not erase her capacity for love. It refines it. Love no longer springs from a void, but from a fullness. She doesn't chase because she doesn't need to. Her heart is no longer a cup held out in supplication. It is a well, overflowing from its own depth. From this place, love becomes commitment without clinging, generosity without exhaustion, intimacy without self-loss. In Jungian terms, she has integrated the inner masculine principle of focus, structure, and sovereignty. This integration allows her to hold herself the way she once ached to be held. She no longer requires another to create safety, for she has built that citadel within. She no longer yearns for completion, for she has met her own wholeness. Her feminine essence no longer fears her masculine strength. They dance within her now, balanced, fluid, sacred. The inner masculine provides direction. The inner feminine offers insight. Together, they compose the symphony that once seemed like a distant dream. She becomes, as Jung said, a vessel for the union of opposites, the sacred inner marriage. From this union, creation flows. Many women, upon arriving here, begin to generate art, enterprises, movements, or communities. They pour into the world what they once poured into individuals. Their energy becomes life-giving, not people-pleasing. The love that once chased now constructs, now mends, now transforms. The world may not comprehend her metamorphosis. Some will say she is altered, distant, too intense, too serene. But these critiques no longer sway her. She understands that people often fear what they cannot control, and they cannot control what is truly free. Her freedom is not defiance, it is alignment. It is the natural condition of a woman who has remembered her own sacred nature. The unstoppable force she embodies is not loud. It does not clamor for attention. It radiates from the quiet knowing that she is sovereign, not over others, but over her own illusions. Her beauty now lies not in her form, but in her presence. Her value not in being chosen, but in the continual act of choosing herself. And in this self-selection, something extraordinary unfolds. Life begins to reflect her wholeness. Opportunities align, relationships deepen, meaningful coincidences abound. What once demanded struggle now arrives with ease, because energy that is complete attraction in place of completeness, not need. Love may still find her, but now it is a meeting of equals, not a salvation project. It is essence recognizing essence, not shadow seeking shelter. It is no longer the love that consumes, but the love that sets free. She has become the manifestation of Jung's greatest insight. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And now she is. There comes a sacred stillness, when a woman finally ceases to seek what was never misplaced. The quest ends, and in its place arises the luminous quiet. The kind that does not crave, does not pursue, does not demand. It simply is. This is not surrender, but revelation. The long, arduous journey toward love outside herself has guided her home. And home, she discovers, was never a person. It was a state of profound presence. In this new mode of being, she lives differently. Time seems to expand. Small moments, light falling across her table, the sound of her own breath, the stillness of early morning, become more than enough. Her nervous system, once ruled by the tension of expectation and worry, finds rest. She no longer waits for a notification, a sign, a signal. She no longer trades her inner peace for another's attention. The constant vigilance that once defined her, the anxious scanning for clues of disinterest, melts into a calm awareness. She can finally take a full breath, and in that breath, life itself changes its rhythm. Jung wrote that the most frightening challenge is to accept oneself completely. This is precisely what she has done. She has made peace with the parts that once scared her. The needy one, the jealous one, the ever-hopeful one, the one who craved to be seen. She no longer tries to exile them. She embraces them. She understands that love is never about erasing her imperfections, but about illuminating them with acceptance. From this wholeness, compassion flows without effort. She can look back at the version of herself who once pleaded, waited, and chased, and smile, not with pity, but with gratitude. Because without that woman, this one would not exist. The pain, the patterns, the heartbreak, they were not mistakes. They were rites of passage into the mystery of her own becoming. The Stoics, too, would see this as the ultimate victory. Not the loud, external kind, but the inner triumph of self-possession. A person's true purpose, Marcus Aurelius taught us, to do what they were made for. Now she understands that she was not made to pursue, to appease, to perform. She was made to be, to create, to expand, to love without self-betrayal. Love for her now is no longer a destination, it is a resonance. It is the very frequency on which she moves through the world. She no longer asks, who will love me? She asks, how can I love more courageously, without fear, without ownership, without pretense? Her love has become a devotional offering, not a targeted request. It is not aimed, it radiates. In Jung's final analysis, she has achieved the symbolic union of the inner feminine and masculine, the sacred inner marriage. Her inner masculine provides stability and intent. Her inner feminine offers wisdom and openness. Together, they generate what Jung termed the self, the complete psyche. It is the stage of individuation where opposites reconcile, where the unconscious and conscious mind no longer conflict but collaborate. The world intuits this integration, even without words for it. Some will be drawn to her, pulled by her stillness. Others may withdraw, uneasy with her autonomy. But she no longer measures her worth by the comfort of others. She knows that freedom can be disquieting to those still trapped in their own projections. So she offers a silent blessing and continues her walk. Her path is no longer one of convincing, but of pure presence. And with each step, her energy becomes unstoppable. Not because she resists, but because she moves with the flow. Like water, she no longer fights against form, she becomes the form itself. Obstacles become passages, enemies become new beginnings. What used to feel like rejection now feels like redirection. What once felt like loss now feels like release. She begins to teach without a single lesson. Simply by living in her truth, she becomes an archetype in motion, the woman who returned to herself. Others observe her and start to question their own pursuits, their own compromises. She does not lecture. She embodies. And embodiment is the most potent form of wisdom. There is nothing left to prove. She knows that everything she once sought through love, belonging, peace, joy, validation, was never meant to be given by another. It was always meant to be unlocked from within. That is the secret the great thinkers have always pointed toward. The divine is not separate from us. It is expressed through our conscious awakening to it. And so she lives now in a quiet radiance, neither grasping nor withdrawing, neither craving nor controlling. Her love has no hidden motive, no terror of loss. She loves because she is herself love. When a woman stops chasing love, she becomes unstoppable. Not because she is hardened, but because she has softened into her own fundamental truth. She moves through life with a grace known only to those who have traveled the full spectrum from longing to liberation. Her presence, in itself, becomes a form of restoration. Her peace, a form of unassailable strength. And this is the heart of individuation, the soul's final homecoming. To no longer flee from your own being. To no longer seek what you have always been. To remember that love was never a treasure to be found. It was a truth to be remembered. She is not waiting anymore. She is not chasing anymore. She has arrived. Thank you for sharing this time with us. Your personal journey gives purpose to this channel, Lens of Thought. Stay with us as we continue to explore, grow, and uncover the truths that shape the human experience. If this resonated, please let us know with a like. Until next time, take care, and we'll see you.